Good morning, guys. Welcome to today's training. We're going to be talking about this topic of narcissists flipping into a codependent paradigm and what's really going on in the background, because there's a fair amount of confusion around this, and it tends to lead to a lot of self-doubt for people who have dealt with narcissistic individuals. Makes them question whether or not they are the problem in the relationship, or that they could have done something different in the relationship to get that person to react differently. So we're going to clear that up today. Now, man, breakfast. Okay. Didn't go down the right pipe there. So if you're new to me, I'm Burtcher, and I help codependents get unstuck in their healing and rediscover their happiness and their well-being after narcissistic abuse and neglect. So I'm going to get this shared out to the community here real quick. If you're looking for a safe haven, a shelter where you can be seen and understood and valued, you can be believed, where you'll have shelter or security from the narcissist, where you can share what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, join the community. The link is above on Facebook, below on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, guys. Thank you for being a part of my community. I'm going to just hit the button here. Today we'll cooperate because it's a technical day again. I don't get it. All right, there we go. So the thing is, what is really happening when the narcissist flips to being codependent? First thing we want to do here is understand the difference between a narcissist and someone with an avoidant attachment. Okay, so in the background, we all have this thing called an attachment system. This attachment system is how we emotionally bond with another human being. This attachment system was shaped by the experience you had with your mother and your father, and it's encoded into the nervous system. It's a somatic element of who we are. And there's 4 basic types of attachment that people develop. And you can have different attachment types with different people, okay? So it's not a uniform thing. It's not universal for an individual. So the first type is called secure. This is where they feel secure in the relationship. They're secure in being valued, being kept, being known, that if they bring up a complaint, they're going to be received and understood, that their feelings and needs and wants matter to the other person. And they feel secure being themselves with that other person or with that group of people. Second type is anxious. This is where an individual has learned unreliability with the other person. They don't know what they're going to get, and so it causes them anxiety, and it causes them to chase and to try to sometimes control the other individual and keep a hypervigilance on what that individual is doing. So it's based on a fear of the other person not being reliable and possibly not being available when the child needs the parent, for instance. So they feel insecure about the level of value they have to the other person, the level of importance, and whether or not they'll be supported in being who they are, what they need, what they feel, that kind of thing. Third type is called avoidant. Avoidant attachment are individuals who were smothered by the parent and used as a surrogate spouse, typically by the parent. The child was given the responsibility to regulate the parent's emotions. The parent absorbs the child's identity, and the parent lives through the child, and so the child doesn't get a chance to be themselves. And they learn to equate intimacy and connection, support and love, with losing themselves, having their identity and their space, their freedom taken from them. And so they numb up and they avoid connection, they avoid intimacy, they avoid confrontation, they avoid attachment or proximity with another human being because they're afraid they're going to lose themselves. Okay, and then you have what's called disorganized. Disorganized attachment is an individual who has a strong anxious avoidant approach and a strong anxious approach and a strong avoidant approach. So they're conflicted. They really need it, and they're going to try to take it, but then they become overwhelmed and scared, so they withdraw. And then they become numb and become independent. It's another thing with the avoidant. They become really independent. They don't need anybody else. They can do it all on their own. The anxious tend to be more on the needful side, the side that says, I need someone so I can feel safe. I need someone so I can do the thing I do. So they're very, very much more enmeshed with the individual, whereas the avoidant wants to be separate and completely and utterly autonomous. This is important to understand because an avoidant person and a narcissistic individual can look a lot the same in that framework, because most narcissists are avoidant. But not all people who are avoidant are narcissists. This is the thing you got to understand. Because a person who is a narcissist or has strong narcissistic tendencies has a different spread of signals. I mean, narcissistic individuals see themselves as very, very special in some way. That might be an extremely positive, grandiose special, like I'm the best in the world and you should respect that. You should see how great I am. Why don't you see it? Then you can have the covert or weak narcissist that would say, I'm the biggest victim in the world. There's nobody that's had it harder than me. I'm awful. I'm the worst. And they revel in their victimhood. They revel in it. It's not something that they want to fix. It's something that they use to manipulate others, get them to have empathy on them so that that person will then give them their cookie. It's the other component. Avoidants aren't looking for supply. They really want connection. They really want to understand and be with another individual, but there's a huge amount of conflict in them. And so they avoid. They become either dismissive or ambivalent to it and just walk away. Sometimes they can be a fearful avoidant where they're very scared and anxious, but they still work on being independent. So you get those kind of combinations going on there. So they're not looking for supply. They're not looking for a cookie. Avoidants are looking for connection. But with a narcissist, they want supply. They want a cookie. They use the person to get what they want, and then they discard them. They're done. Now, an avoidant will go into a silent treatment mode when they withdraw and go into their cocoon. And that can feel a lot like a discard, and it can be very hard to determine the difference between the two. So that's one of those parallels that can make you think, I might be dealing with a narcissist. But if this individual is not grandiose in how they see the world, they don't believe that they should be held accountable to anything. See, a narcissist doesn't believe they deserve accountability, because they think they're above the law. They think the law is for everybody else. They avoid accountability, and they lack a strong sense. They lack a strong sense of self-worth, or self-awareness rather, to understand their impact on another individual. Now, avoidants, they have empathy. They understand their impact. They don't have a tool set in which to communicate that often. Usually, they feel a deep sense of shame, sorrow, regret for the impact they have on another human being. They just don't have an ability or current skill set or capacity to connect with the other individual in a way that would be constructive, because they're afraid of being smothered. So they avoid it, right? So there's a parallel there. It's important. Now, narcissistic ones, will always be on the toxic side of the relating spectrum. They will attack, they will demean, they will dehumanize, they will gaslight, they will attempt to manipulate and control, they will deny, attack, and reverse the order of victim and offender, Darvo. They will make you the problem chronically. Now, someone with unmanaged avoidant attachment, they'll typically do a blame and a reflex that way. Most humans do that at some point in their development. They become blameful because they don't want to deal with the consequences of accountability, but then they start to work it out. Okay. Now, a healthy avoidant, such as myself, is going to own what they do, and they're going to be mindful of their limits and capacity, and then they're going to communicate those and work out balances that allow them to function in a relationship on a consensual basis. So I am a dismissive avoidant, so I have to work with that. Now, Narcissistic individuals expect others to regulate their feelings. Avoidant people just want to be left alone. It's another signal there. And then narcissistic individuals believe that they're entitled to things. They're entitled to have what they want when they want it. They're entitled to get what they want when they want it. And they are entitled to get it regardless of what it requires of another person to give it to them. Avoidant people don't have a sense of entitlement. They have a sense of empathy, and they may even have a stronger sense of shame as to not being deserving of what they desire or want. So these are the ways you can start to discern between an avoidant and a narcissistic individual. And this explains why a narcissist flips to a codependent, because you're not actually dealing with a narcissist. You're dealing with an avoidant with some narcissistic traits that then flips to a codependent or chase approach. Because if you look at, I hope this is making sense. Let me know if it makes sense in the comments, guys. So if you look at codependency and narcissism on an attachment, from an attachment point of view, the narcissism would show up more in the avoidance spectrum, and the codependent would show up in the anxious spectrum, okay, of attachment. So a person can flip and engage in a codependent behavior or codependent relationship with an individual that they feel they have to chase because the other person is being avoidant. And couples will do this. Sometimes the woman will be really, really avoidant, so the man will chase, and then she'll soften up and she'll want more connection, and that will activate the man's avoidant attachment, and they'll run. You're basically dealing with two people with disorganized attachment chasing and running after each other. And that's a problem. Yeah, that needs to be worked out, because that's just going to exhaust both of you. And it's quite toxic on trust. It hammers trust and intimacy into the ground. So that alone is not a healthy thing. It has to be addressed, right? But you're not technically dealing with a narcissist, because narcissists generally don't flip. And if they do become really compliant and fawning, it's because they're manipulating you to get you to stop holding them accountable and stop exacting a consequence on them that they know they can't escape unless they please you. That's the trick there. Whether it's an avoidant person or a narcissistic person, it comes down to one thing. Are they willing to own their behavior? Are they willing to correct it? And do they demonstrate empathy for what they're doing? Thank you, Jennifer. That's the key. So it really doesn't matter if you're dealing with an avoidant individual, a narcissistic individual, a codependent individual, an unavailable individual. The bare minimum, guys, the bare minimum, the thing that must absolutely exist in the relationship is accountability, reliability, and empathy. Come on. That's what it breaks down to. They have to be reliable in their accountability, their integrity. They have to be reliable in empathy. If you don't have those four elements, you're not going to get there. It's just not going to happen. So it doesn't matter if they're avoidant, codependent, narcissistic. If they're unwilling to own, they're unwilling to change, they're unwilling to empathize, get the hell out. Period. Don't confuse love with compatibility. That's that fantasy, the codependent fantasy kicking in there. Compatibility is a behavior level element. It's not an emotional element. Compatibility is borne out by the behavior, the patterns of behavior in the relationship, and how that feels to you, right? So love is irrelevant to compatibility at that point. All right, Pamela. So this is what's going on when you witness a narcissistic individual flip to a codependent. One or two things is going on. Either they're actually avoidant and they have toxic management or toxic behaviors in managing their feelings, their needs, or you're dealing with a narcissist that's fawning to get out of accountability. So you can look at the context and look at what's going on, and you can start to discern through the context and through their patterns of behavior what's really happening and what's going on for you there. So that's what's going on in the background. Most of the time, people who move from a narcissistic avoidant approach to a codependent approach or dealing with disorganized attachment. So there you go. If you want to learn more about attachment, I recommend the book Attached. There's only one thing in that book that I'd recommend questioning, because I question it. And I do have a bias in this. The author believes that codependency isn't real, but fundamentally we actually can and have demonstrated that it is real. It's just a fawn response in the brain. And so, yeah, there's that. But otherwise, guys, attachment's real. It's playing a huge role in how you relate to others. And it is something to be mindful of when you're working with people. You're building relationships or friendships with them, to understand where they may be coming from, and then become really clear about the difference between narcissistic individuals and avoidant individuals, because there are very different flags, different signals there to help you understand them. And sometimes they're both. So if you're seeing both, you're dealing with someone that has both traits. And frankly, guys, if you're dealing with someone with both traits, you're never going to have a healthy, well-managed relationship with that, because they're not available. They don't create connection. They just want their cookie. If you're dealing with a narcissistic individual, they just want your cookie, and you're going to get used. If you're dealing with an avoidant individual, if they're willing to work out their shit and deal and heal, and then they start to do it, and you start to see change, you're good to go. But if this is like early stage in the dating, then you got to ask yourself the question, do I want to invest my time in this, or do I want to move on to something that's already available? I highly recommend dating available people and not unavailable people, hoping that they'll change, because that's just your codependent fantasy kicking into gear there. Okay. Appreciate you guys. Remember that you're worth knowing, loving, and keeping. We are 19 days out from the Unmasking the Narcissist masterclass. It's free. The link is below on YouTube, above on Facebook. Be sure to sign up. be sure to sign up on that. So one of those like tongue twisters there. And I'll be excited to see you at 6 p.m. Mountain Time on the 23rd of September. You guys have a great day. Be safe out there, and I'll see you in our next video. Bye-bye.